Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. 4.2 rates. I can use ratios as rates. So quickly, before we get into rates and unit rates, which is our vocab to start, you need to remember that a ratio is a comparison of two quantities. This is our vocab from the last lesson. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities. So I can use a comparison of two quantities as rates. I just substituted in the definition for ratios. I can use a comparison of two quantities as rates. A rate compares two quantities with different units. When I say units, I mean labels. An example would be miles per hour. If you are going, you don't need to write this down, but if you are going 60 miles in 1 hour, that is going to be a rate. It's also a ratio because we're comparing two different quantities. But now we're going to be a little bit more specific and call it a rate because we're comparing two quantities with different labels. One label is miles, one label is hours, 60 miles per hour. The example that I gave you is miles per hour. If you want to, you can write down the 60 miles per 1 hour underneath letter A. That might be helpful. Number two, a unit rate is comparing two quantities, so just like a rate, but the second quantity is always going to be 1. So again, comparing two quantities, but the second quantity is always going to be 1. So I'll get you an example in a second when it comes to unit rates, which is where we're heading next. Cheat sheet idea for number 1, and move on to number 2. Fun facts about rates. Rates often use the term per, so when you're dealing with rates, you will oftentimes, like in miles per hour, use the word per. Number 4, to find any rate, you must always have different units or labels. So again, if we go back up to number 1, we said a rate would be a comparison of two quantities with different units or labels, and we just basically repeated ourselves in number 4. We said to find any rate, you must always have different units or labels. Cheat sheet idea for number 2, do the best you can. I know that there's very, very few facts, but do the best you can. And number 3, rate practice. This is the last main idea. Miss Gamby ran 80 pacers in 20 minutes. So Miss Gamby is running 80 pacers and she's doing it in 20 minutes. Write this as a rate. So a rate is a comparison of two quantities with different labels. If she is running 80 pacers in 20 minutes, that would be good enough. 80 pacers over 20 minutes. Remember from our previous lesson, you could also write 80 pacers, colon, to 20 minutes. Sorry that I'm going into the cheat sheet area. Or you could write 80 pacers, I have to write small here, to 20 minutes. Any way that you write that is okay. There's 3 different ways to express your ratios, or in this case, your rate. Number 6, express Miss Gamby's rate as a unit rate. So if I go all the way back up here, I know that a unit rate is a comparison of two quantities, but the second quantity is always 1. So really what you're doing for number 6 here, express Miss Gamby's rate as a unit rate, we already know it's 80 pacers per 20 minutes. We just reduce it because 80 and 20 have a common factor of 20. So 80 divided by 20 would be 40 pacers. 80 divided by 20 would be 4 pacers, and 20 divided by 20 would be 1 minute. So for her to run at a rate of 80 pacers in 20 minutes, she has to do 4 pacers per 1 minute to get to 80 pacers in 20 minutes. So her unit rate would be 4 pacers per 1 minute. And the reason this is a unit rate is because my denominator is 1. My second number is 1. It doesn't always have to be the denominator. It depends on how you write it. You could also write it as 4 pacers. I'm just going to abbreviate pacers with a P to 1 minute. But the second number in your rate, if it's a unit rate, always has to be 1. Moving on really quick here, I'm going to go back up. Again, comparing two quantities, but the second quantity, the second number, is always 1 when you have unit rates. Very last idea here for number 7. If Mrs. Miller eats 25 hot dogs in 5 hours, sorry, Mrs. Miller, but if she's eating 25 hot dogs in 5 hours, write her pace as a unit rate when it comes to eating, or when it comes to hot dog eating. Well, her rate is 25 hot dogs per 5 hours. That's a rate because we have 2 different labels. And if I want to reduce that down into a unit rate, I somehow have to get my second number down to 1. So in this case, it would be 1 hour. So how did we get from 5 hours to 1 hour? Divided by 5, right? So if we divide that by 5, it's just like reducing fractions again. Divide the 25 hot dogs by 5, you have to divide the top number by the same as you divided the bottom number to get to your 1 hour, or your unit rate. So 25 hot dogs divided by 5 would be 5 hot dogs per 1 hour. And if you do the math on that, if she eats 5 hot dogs every hour, is she going to get to 25 hot dogs in 5 hours? Well, of course she is. After 2 hours, she's going to be at 10. After 3 hours, she's going to be at 15. After 4 hours, she's going to be at 20. And then after 5 hours, she's going to be at 25. So to find unit rates, you are essentially just reducing to lowest terms, but you have to be sure that the denominator, or that second number, is a 1. Cheat sheet idea, that's the end of the notes. Good luck on your assignment, which is posted in your update.